listening to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Seravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com.
Welcome to episode 25 of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Gregor along with Frank Seravalli. We're coming to you from the woodjerseys.com studio. Welcome to woodjerseys.com to the program. Always great to have more sponsors, and thank you for watching and listening, because the numbers keep going up and people want to be part of the show. So we really appreciate that. You can go to woodjerseys.com. They're officially licensed NHL apparel supplier. It's awesome stuff. Take your fan cave to the next level. As Frank Seravalli joins us. And Frankie, I feel a little bit better on a Monday morning.
I am feeling better. I did want to say welcome to woodjerseys.com. I don't know if you've seen them or checked out their product. If you haven't, go do it, because the detail on this, like, I'm the least handy person ever to think about the process that goes into getting every part of these jerseys right. It's incredible. So definitely something you want to have. And they've got the 7 Canadian teams right now, and they're going to be expanding to the rest of the NHL's 32 shortly. So get in right now while they're still getting going.
Yeah, it's awesome. Speaking of getting going, we're pretty much confirmed on who the playoff teams are. There's really the one spot left open, Nashville or Dallas will come down to the final stretch. And it's got an interesting wrinkle to that, because if Dallas does make it, and they're finishing all their games on the road here in the regular season, if they make the playoffs, there's talk about them trying to go to 100% capacity for fans.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Like, I'm rooting for the Dallas Stars to get in first off. And one of those reasons why is because of that potential for the 100% capacity, not just what they've been through in this crazy season with their COVID pause, with the natural disaster that they went through. It's been an incredible year in Dallas. And I talked to their CEO and president last week, Brad Alberts, and that's exactly what they're weighing at the moment. They have the green light, Jason, from the city of Dallas, from the state of Texas, to go to 100% capacity, 18,500 people. And they're just weighing right now, is this the right thing to do? Is this the right thing to do for our part-time staff and ushers who would have to be enforcing the mask mandate? And what's interesting about it is that the NHL isn't going to stand in their way. If they meet all of the protocols and procedures, the league isn't going to step in and say, well, you really should go to 50% or you should go to 75% just for safety. If they have met all of their protocol, the NBA has already said to the Dallas Mavericks, who play in the same building, you can't go past 50%. But the NHL also, what's interesting about this, and this could have a potential playoff impact, and I'm wondering if it would, they are not concerned about the competitive balance part of this. If Dallas is playing Carolina in the first round, and let's say Carolina is at 50% or 25%, they're not going to try and match that up. You could be playing at 100% in Dallas and 50% in Carolina. Does that tilt any sort of balance in a series? Does that make a difference? I don't know. It's, for the Stars to be the first indoor team in North America pro sports to get back to 100%, it'd be something to see.
Yeah, well, it would create a lot of conversations for a lot of people who might say too early for that, depending. The social conscience factor will be definitely what's there. Obviously, they got to get in, right? And that's what's challenging. They got Florida tonight. They got Tampa Bay twice. They do have the one game in hand on Nashville, but I think they have a little bit more difficult schedule. All 5 of their games are on the road. So we'll see if they even get
against
in.
Chicago, though.
Yeah, no, that's true. But, the Blackhawks
They've got a chance.
Yeah, no, they got a chance. I'm just saying the Blackhawks haven't been, like the free space and the bingo card. Anytime you're playing 5 in a row, like I think Dallas's last 7 or 8 games of the season are all on the road. So you're on the road that long, that adds a little extra challenge to it, and what has been a very challenging season for sure. Now, let's stay in that division, then we'll move on. The Carolina Hurricanes, I'm not sure there's many of us who had the Hurricanes. Most of us had them as a playoff team, but finishing first in their division and first in the NHL, they're right up there with Vegas right now. Mm-hmm. And it looks like, unless there's a collapse by Carolina here down the stretch, that they're going to finish first. And that means Florida and Tampa, Frank, first ever Battle of Florida in the playoffs.
I would like to say I can't believe it's never happened, but the fact that Florida rarely ever makes the playoffs, I kind of, you understand why that's the case. But still, I mean, what a series that would be. Just to go down as a hockey fan, could drive back and forth, little vacation, some warm weather, some sunshine, and arguably some of the best hockey being played this season has been between those two teams. The games have been ridiculous. Any game between Carolina and those two teams has been really good too. So, Florida's had such a fascinating year. I don't think anyone would have picked that team. You could say, okay, maybe they're a playoff team, but to be keeping pace with the defending Stanley Cup champs, they've been right there all year. That team has shown no sign of let up. And then they've only gotten stronger since the trade deadline. Like Sam Bennett has been ridiculous.
Oh, he's been great with Huberdeau on that line. They've been fantastic for Bennett. And it makes now Florida's opportunity to qualify Bennett at $2.9 million, the way he's played for them. If that continues, probably a much easier decision than people thought it might be for Calgary 2 months ago.
Yeah, and I think all credit in this case goes to Sam Bennett, because for the longest time in Calgary, he had said, I'm better than what I've been able to show here. And I think they chalked so much of that up to opportunity, saying, I haven't gotten an opportunity to play here and showcase my skill set the way it can be, that I'm sort of being pigeonholed as one type of player. I'm more than that. And so I think at this point, with the number of games that Sam Bennett had played in this league, you were saying, maybe not. Like, at a certain point, you kind of are what you are what your stats show and what your production shows. And he's gone to Florida and totally flipped that narrative on its head.
We go from the Central over to the West, and Colorado and Minnesota right now, it looks like they're going to meet up in the first round. Who's going to get home ice advantage? A little bit of an advantage for Colorado because of their games in hand. But you look at those two teams, and both of them are really led by their younger guys. Not that Nathan McKinnon's that young anymore, I guess we should say. But I look at Minnesota, for years, Frank, Minnesota was that team because they were so good defensively. They were like, you never know if they ever get in, they might do some damage. But they've become a much more exciting team to watch. I've watched more Wild games than I think I ever have in my life.
I think everyone is saying that.
That series really intrigues me because there's just something about Minnesota. Like, I love Colorado. I love how they play. I think Minnesota's going to give them a run.
Yeah, I could see it. I still think Colorado they're going to be a tough out for anyone. Like, I don't care if it's Minnesota in the first round, if it's Vegas in the second round or whoever it might be in the third. Like, I just see Colorado as a team that has only really scratched the surface this year. As well as they've played in their last 20 games or 25 games, like they're still not even playing as good as they probably could be. So I like Minnesota. Kirill Kaprizov has given that team such a shot in the arm. And you see it on a nightly basis. It's not just the fancy edge work. It's the way he's on the puck all the time. Give it, go get it back right away. He's a special player, and he's changed the feel of that team. And also, let's be honest, it feels like there's been a passing of the torch in terms of that team. And, you once viewed it as sort of for the longest time, the Suter Parise team. And now it's the Spurgeon and Kaprizov and all these other guys, the Greenways and Eriksson X, all these guys that have really stepped up to make a big difference for Minnesota.
Yeah. Man, a lot of this 2-3 matchups, like they really,
you know what? I was thinking, how good these 2-3 matchups are. You know what that means? That in those two divisions in particular, the Central and the West, it really means something to finish first.
Oh, 100%. There's a big advantage there, no question. And, you look in the other two divisions. Well, in the East, we don't even know who's finishing second or third. It's, it's very close there. Washington seemingly has the advantage maybe to
We don't know who's
third.
Finishing first.
Yeah. Like Washington, I don't know what the odds are, but they're probably slightly ahead now to finish first, but it's not by much at all. Whereas, the North is pretty much set. Now, I know that if Winnipeg really continues to falter, that maybe Montreal catches them. But Winnipeg, their remaining schedule is a lot easier, where Montreal plays Edmonton twice and Toronto 3 times. Meanwhile, Montreal plays Ottawa and Calgary and Vancouver. So they definitely got the easier schedule. And Winnipeg plays those teams, not Montreal. And Winnipeg likely is probably still going to finish third, take on Edmonton. The Jets, we had Paul Maurice on the DFO earlier this year.
The inaugural guest.
Yeah, they've hit the skids, Frank. Injuries have played a major role. Nikolai Ehlers, I talked about when he went down. I thought that was a huge blow because he just drives so much for their team 5-on-5. And Adam Lowry could be back in the lineup tonight for the Jets. Helps a lot. But the Jets 5-on-5 play, and I've watched them a lot here in the last 3 weeks. It's really kind of cratered. They're just not generating much.
Yeah. And I think, if you followed the team closely all year, a lot of what people have been sort of critical behind the scenes about are saying that this is all finally catching up to them. And it couldn't be happening at a worse time. Now, I think for the reasons you mentioned, Lowry coming back, Ehlers coming back, you get a chance to maybe get Connor Hellebuck a little rest at a certain point and he can flip the switch into playoff mode. And, can you get Blake Wheeler re-energized? Speaking of driving play, and back to the guy that he was for the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks of the season. I don't know. I think there's an opportunity here for that team to hit a reset button when they get to the playoffs, throw out the record in the regular season against the Oilers, get these guys back, feel like a bit of a different team. And I actually asked our guest about this, Gerard Gallant, specifically about a team like the Jets. If you're a coach, how do you pull your team out of a spiral? Is it tougher at this point in the season? And, it's going to be a challenge for this team to get their confidence back to where it was, because that's what spoke loudest to me was Andrew Kopp's words last week saying that this team's confidence was shaken.
Yeah, it's amazing how timing plays such a big factor for any team. You have a key injury in January or October, let's say, in a normal year. You just have so much more time to get back. That player gets back to speed, and lots of times teams that are playing well heading into the postseason just continue on that. And key injuries, like to me, there's nothing more devastating than a key injury to a team. Like you look at Tampa in 2019, right? Victor Hedman gets hurt in the fourth final game of the year, misses the final 3 games. Then he comes back and plays 2 games where he's not remotely close to healthy. Like he couldn't even turn, like David Savard turnstiled him. And I know everyone says it's a highlight reel goal, but watch Hedman. He couldn't turn to the right clearly. Like you would never see a guy like that play that way. So, certain teams and in this season, because it's been shortened, I wonder if we see teams, Frank, here in the final 2 weeks of the season, or week, I guess, depending if you're Pittsburgh or some other teams, if we see them potentially rest some guys more than they would in a normal playoff year. I'm very curious to see how that plays out here in the next 10 days.
I would think about it. I think long and hard about it. And to go back to your previous point, not to hammer this home, this metaphor, but using the Jets, you need altitude. Any pilot will tell you. And when you get to this point in the season, you're running out of altitude to turn things around and to pull up and get your team in the right spot. But with regards to resting, we've never seen a schedule like this. Like you add in these COVID pauses that happened in March, and it's thrown everything through a loop. I know that we added an extra week to the season, but the games are so jumbled in there. If I was a coach and I'm in a spot where, even if I'm a team like Winnipeg and you're saying, well, we want to make sure Montreal doesn't catch us, that doesn't mean as much to me as having my team in the best position, because you're making the playoffs either way. Does it make a huge difference, Edmonton or Toronto in the first round? With the way that they've matched up against Edmonton, I'd say maybe it makes more sense for them to play Toronto in the first round. So, you want to get your team right. And with 15 of the 16 playoff spots largely having been decided, the last one being Nashville or Dallas, I think it makes sense to take a step back and make sure your affairs are in order.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating down the stretch, just because, and I know that in some places there's no fans, and in other places there's 20% or 5%, and some it's up to 50, varying. But I still believe that home ice advantage has a big deal to this. You get last change, and for certain teams, like you look at Edmonton, if you get last change, and that means 2 or 3 times a period, Dave Tippett gets an offensive zone start matchup that he wants for McDavid. That could be the difference in a game, because McDavid's that good when he starts in the offensive zone, right? So I think there's a lot, like in the Eastern Conference, Washington, Pittsburgh, look at the home records of those teams. Like home ice advantage, man, it means a lot. And so it's going to be interesting. Do they say, yeah, we want our team rested, but man, I want the home ice. It's a great balancing act.
Well, you might also be able to take a step back and evaluate some other things. Like I know you mentioned this a couple of shows ago about the game within the game, and watch how these matchups are playing out as we've sort of seen some of these playoff previews with these teams meeting so frequently. Do coaches try different things? Do you want to get a look of this certain line against that line, see how that plays out? And if you get your doors blown off, do you say, okay, well, we know that doesn't work for the playoffs? Or do you try and evaluate something else and the chance that you have? Maybe if you are resting guys, get an answer on someone that you've been curious about.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at the East specifically, and there's really not a lot of playing each other games. I think Pittsburgh plays Washington and the Islanders once, and that's kind of it. You know, they're all playing Buffalo or Philly or
a lot of
Rangers.
non-playoff teams against non-playoff.
So it's kind of weird in that sense. So maybe that allows them to experiment with a different line. Like in certain teams, I've seen that down the stretch. So it will be fascinating. One, before we go to get to Gerard Gallant, of course, he started his career with the Detroit Red Wings. I'm watching the Red Wings down the stretch here. They're coming on, but Bernier and Greiss have both played so well. Like I wonder if the reason Steve Yzerman didn't trade those guys, Frank, is that he really wants to re-sign a guy like Bernier rather than trade him for a 3rd round pick at the deadline and lose him. And you look at the way he's playing, or maybe he was asking for too much, but it's still kind of surprising to me that some of the goalies who got traded leading up to the deadline, that Bernier didn't. Like, I'm still kind of amazed by that.
Yeah, I think there's so many teams, and I think we talked about this last week, that have been sort of gun shy about the idea of acquiring a goalie midseason. And I think that's why so few moved this year. And, the Bernier one is surprising just because just understanding a little bit of the Red Wings mantra in their own front office has been, we're going to try and get as many picks as we can. And, even though we like these guys and potentially may want to bring them back, we can do that in the summer anyway. So, I think the injury with Bernier played probably a small factor as well. The fact that he was out so long until right before the deadline, that there were limited showings, but his record speaks for itself this year on one of the worst teams in the league. His record is 9-11-1. So in 10 out of his 21 games on record, he's picked up at least a point for a team that, has largely played 400 hockey all season long. So he's been really good, 914 save percentage. And there's been a lot of other guys that certainly haven't played as well that ended up staying in those positions with playoff teams that could have probably really gotten a boost from a guy like Bernier.
Yeah, it's something interesting. The goaltender free agent market this year is going to be just very intriguing to watch, to see who moves around, what kind of
expansion draft.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
They
what
got a lot of
does
goalie
so
options.
much of it. Yeah.
They got a lot of goalie options there.
And then that's why it's another interesting summer for a team like the Edmonton Oilers. Like, Mike Smith has played so well this season. He's the NHL's comeback player of the year for me. No question about that. I don't think anyone's even close. But do you bring back a 39-year-old Mike Smith? What do you do? I guess it all depends on how the playoffs shake out.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. Let's get now to our big guest of the week, brought to you by Jock MKT. That's Jock Market. It's a hybrid between fantasy and the stock market, where you can trade shares of players in real time with other users. You want to be buying low and expecting a guy to have a big week or a big night and really cash in. It's loads of fun. If you want to play it, it's free to try it. Use the promo code DFO20. That's DFO20. Gives you a $20 deposit to try it out, see your luck, see how much you know the stock market and how much you know values of players. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And they have it for golf and lots of other sports. So check it out, jockmkt.com.
Our next guest is the pride of Prince Edward Island. He played parts of 11 seasons in the NHL. And what's most impressive about that is in the 4 straight years in which he hit 30 goals, he also had 200 plus penalty minutes. And while you know him for his playing career, you also know him more recently for his exploits behind the bench, where he guided the Vegas Golden Knights to the Stanley Cup final in their inaugural season, which earned him the Jack Adams Award as the Coach of the Year. So the DFO Rundown is pleased to welcome Gerard Gallant. Thanks a lot for joining us.
No problem, guys. Anytime.
So we'll start here. You're coaching in a very unique year at the World Championships. What has your preparation been like over the last number of weeks?
Well, we just got it going. I found it a week and a half ago that, they asked me the head coaching job with Team Canada. So obviously we got our assistant coach and coaching staff together. We started trying to put some video together to get the system stuff down pat, because when we get there, there's not going to be a lot of time. There's no exhibition games. We got 3 days of practicing. So we got to do our work now and get prepared for when we get over there.
Now, when you're doing that work, Gerard, how much of an input and conversation is it with Roberto Luongo in terms of trying to target players? Because this is such a unique year, I don't want to say there's a convincing process that needs to go on, but you got to have guys that are interested and willing to come to Latvia after sort of being locked down in the NHL with a really strict bubble for the last number of months. How's that process been in terms of trying to get players?
It's going to be challenging. There's no doubt. For the first day we had meetings, we talked about that, and we know it's going to be challenging. But you know what? It's Team Canada. You know, they treat you first class. And my past experience with Team Canada has been excellent. Like you said, the COVID world's different. It's going to take a lot of convincing, but there's a lot of guys that, you know, they're going to be proud to wear that Team Canada jersey, and we're going to have to go out there. Roberto and Shane are, you know, working behind the scenes, talking to general managers and talking about some of their players, and hopefully we'll get a good supporting cast and go over there and have a strong team.
Gerard, I know you were sitting around watching games, but you didn't really have a plan that you were going to be coaching Team Canada. It's not like you applied for the job. They came to you and said, hey, do you want it? So your own personal decision when they approached you, why was it the right time for you to take the job?
Well, you know what? Before I took the Vegas job, I was assistant coach with Team Canada with John Cooper's staff. So hopefully it's a good omen that I get another opportunity in the NHL as a head coach. But no, to be honest with you, like I said, the previous experience with Team Canada was excellent. So when they give me the chance to be the head coach this year with this year's squad, you know, it was a no-brainer for me. I wanted to get back into coaching. It's been 50 months since I've been behind a bench, so I think it's going to work out real good. And again, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a fun 3 weeks. It's going to be different. It's going to be tough, but I'm going to enjoy it.
You've been an NHL head coach for 3 different teams. You've been a head coach, assistant coach, head coach before. Is there a benefit at all of having time away? Is there, you know, that recharging of the batteries? Is that true at all? Do you find like now you're just like itching to get back? Did you need that? Or were you like, no, I could have coached for 15 straight years. It's not an issue.
I didn't need that this time. I mean, don't get me wrong. The 3 or 4 months was okay. You know, you got through that, but when COVID hit and the 15 months hit and there was no job opportunities, really, I mean, nothing worked out. I mean, it was too long. 15 months is too long. I wanted to be back coaching before that. But again, there's a lot of positives from that 15 months being off. I had spent a lot of time with my family. I wasn't in the bubbles and stuff where, you know, a lot of guys weren't happy being in bubbles, but it's part of it. And you were sort of away from COVID. I mean, I've been in Prince Edward Island the majority of the time, and there's been very little COVID down here. So it's been perfect in that aspect, and a lot of time with my grandkids. So that was awesome.
Yeah, the family time's great, Turk. But in this case, you know, when you are out of work for that period of time, and there have been a lot of coaching changes through that time, was there anything that you were close on? Were you having conversations with GMs about any potential opportunities?
I mean, obviously my name was out there with the Washington job and the New Jersey job. So I interviewed for those jobs and talked to them, and things went well. And at the end of the day, they went and hired somebody else. Then they hired 2 very good coaches. Peter Laviolette's a great coach. He's doing a great job there. Lindy Ruff's doing a great job in New Jersey. So, you know, I got no issues with that. That's that's the way that the hockey scene goes with coaching. And like I said, it's not a big deal for me. And I think I'll get back in here hopefully, and we'll see what happens. But again, we'll wait and see where it goes.
Mm-hmm. When you are watching games, what are you keying in on? Is there anything that you're watching for specifically? Have you picked up on anything? Is there anything systems wise, a new wrinkle? Is it the same old, you know, when we get to see you behind a bench again, are we going to see the same style?
A lot of it, there might be a little bit different, a little tweaking here and there, but for the most part, it's, you know, I think my style suited me real well. I mean, our teams were offensive teams with a lot of energy, played a fast game, worked hard, and scored a lot of goals. And, you know, we were a pretty good defensive team, both of those teams too, in Florida and Vegas. So, you know, I think we had a good record. I think things were going real well. So it's just, you know, I'm not going to change a whole lot. I'm not going to change the coach I was. I feel I had success and done a good job. And I think if you talk to players that played under me, they think I'm a pretty good coach.
You have a reputation of players have talked very publicly about how much they really enjoyed playing for you. Can you talk about maybe your coaching personality and why you think it connects to today's current player?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I treat the players with a lot of respect. I treat them, they come to the rink, we have fun. Fun's the biggest thing. We have a lot of fun. We work hard in our short practices and we get ready to play. And to me, it's all about playing in the games at 7 o'clock at night or 2 in the afternoon, whenever we're playing. We play hard, we compete hard. And I think anybody that you talk to, my teams play hard and they compete hard and they have a lot of fun.
Now, Gerard, when you played, Frank was talking about 30 goals, 200 PIMs. You played with Steve Yzerman, and you had a tough guy, a real tough guy in your line at times, Bobby Probert. But you were that mix of a power forward in the 80s, tough as well. Do you find as a coach, do you gravitate to guys who have the different skill sets that you had? Or do you appreciate the different styles of players? How is that as a coach when it comes to maybe, I don't know if there's a natural built-in bias of, hey, this is how I played. I'd like guys to play how I play.
Well, I don't think there's not near as many players in my style back in my day. I mean, the 200 penalty minutes, that doesn't happen much anymore. And, 35 goals, it's a different era at that time. And I think, in today's game, you need a mix of everything. You need some good character guys. You need veteran players. You need good young players that are coming up. Everybody has to be able to skate, a lot of speed in the game today. So it's a different game type, really. And like I said, I think I'm, as a coach with had some experience over the last 10 or 11 years, that you need a combination of everything.
Is there one opportunity? I mean, Jason mentioned right there the connection with Steve Yzerman. I think so many people are curious, what happens this offseason. Is there one potential opening or opportunity that you've had in mind? Would Detroit be a fit for you? And, what if you how have you kept busy in terms of, monitoring what's going on around the league?
You know what? I haven't paid a lot of attention to that, to be honest with you. I mean, like you said, I'm looking for my next opportunity. There's 32 NHL teams going to be here shortly. Oh, there's 32 now. So, you're looking for a job. I mean, hopefully something comes up and the right opportunity. I've been in the position before where you get fired and it's never fun. So, you work it, you do your job, you do the best you can. And if there's an opportunity or somebody's going to give you a call and talk about a job, I'm looking forward to it. But again, I haven't picked any team or looked at any team and said, I hope this team loses tonight. Or, this would be a perfect job for me. No, I haven't looked at it like that. Not at all. Sure.
And you mentioned the Vegas part of it. Have you kept an eye on the Golden Knights, or has that been difficult?
That's still difficult. I mean, somebody asked me the other day about Florida. I said, well, you know what? I'm over the Florida thing. It's just the front of your mind is Vegas now. And I have a hard time watching them. I watch them once in a while, don't get me wrong, because they're a good hockey team and the coaching staff, the board knows that did an excellent job there. So there's no hard feelings there, really. It's just hard when you're watching the players that, you started that franchise with and for 2.5 years. And then all of a sudden, you're gone from that. So you still got a lot of good memories there, but it's not easy.
The challenge of coaching an expansion team, Gerard, and it doesn't matter to me, I think, who takes the Seattle job, to try to live up to Vegas's first season is almost impossible. That's like the greatest expansion season ever. There's teams that have been in the league 50 years that don't get to the Stanley Cup, never mind in year one. Would you want the challenge of an expansion team again? Because it does seem very different. I'm not saying you go in expecting to lose, but it's rare that you're an expansion team that you expect to be competitive right away.
Yeah, no, again, it's, to me, somebody calls me with the right opportunity, I'm going to look at it. And obviously I'd be really interested in, whether expansion or whatever it's going to be, if it's a Seattle team or if it's a team that's got a chance to win the Stanley Cup, supposedly a high ranked team. But no, it's just an opportunity to get back in coaching again. And truthfully, I believe in today's game, you can turn your team around real quickly. I mean, there's some teams at the bottom of the standings, and in a year or 2 years' time, they can be at the top of the standings. I really believe that with the way the system is today.
So go back to kind of your scouting as a coach. When you're watching games, 1 game, 2 games a night, are you taking notes to see, and is there significant differences in what other coaches implement? Because you probably see the really minute details of a game. Is there a significant difference overall, or is there really only 3 or 4 systems and coaches are running basically the same?
That's what there's not a big difference in a lot of teams. I mean, everybody says they want to break the puck out the middle of the ice. Well, that's true. Sometimes you can't do it. So there's not a whole lot of difference in our systems. There's some difference. I think the biggest thing is when you do a little adjustment between periods on your systems, then you're seeing how the other teams are playing. But I don't see a whole lot of difference. Like I watch Carolina and, I see that team play and they play a fast game. They're very similar to what I played in Vegas. And, they work hard, they compete hard, they put pressure on the puck all over the ice. And, it's a team that's going to work hard and play fast. And that's how they play.
Have you enjoyed this rare, probably once in a lifetime season that we're having with the teams only playing the same opponents every night? As a coach, would that be easier or more challenging because they know what you're doing, they see you all the time, or conversely, you feel like, hey, we know what they're doing, so we have a better chance to shut them down?
Depends if you're the better team or not. No, I mean, truthfully, I think it's a little bit too much, obviously. I think somewhere in between that would be real good. I mean, playing teams 8 and 10 times and then you're going to meet them in the playoffs. That's going to be, a little bit too much of it and a little bit too hard feelings. Like you said, you play teams three times in a row. And I think you get, a little more fighting, a little more chippiness. So I'd like to be a fine balance of that. And just, Toronto, Montreal, you'd like to see them, but you don't want to see them 14 or 15 times. You'd like to see them 6, 7, 8 times during the season and a playoff.
You mentioned Carolina, Gerard. Is there a team that you really like watching?
Yeah, I like the way they play. Again, they're a fast team. They play a real good game. They're successful. I like the way they play a lot. There's a lot of good teams out there, obviously. I mean, you sit down and you say, who's going to win the Stanley Cup this year? And sure, there's 3 or 4 favorites, but really, again, it's an old cliche, but there's 16 teams that got a chance to win this year. And I'm trying to pick out who's going to win the first round of the playoffs. You're all over the board. There's real good teams. And but one thing I did notice this year is some good teams go through stretches where they look real bad for 2 weeks. And, you look at, I think a team like Boston, they had a real tough time, for a couple of weeks time, and then they come back and they win 5 in a row and they look real solid again. So, and I think that's more to do with the COVID and what's going on than anything else, because there's some really good solid teams, and pretty much every team has gone through a streak like that this year.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that this year in particular. No team's been immune to that this year. And I don't know if it's the schedule or, certain breaks that we've had with some of these COVID pauses, but if you had a team, pick one out of the hat at the moment, the Winnipeg Jets, who have had a tough last 2 weeks. As a coach, how do you start to pull a team out of that? And now as you get towards the last couple weeks of the season, is it more difficult to do with the playoffs looming?
Well, I think as a coach, you're saying that, like I said, Winnipeg's had a tough go the last 5 games, and I think they're a real good hockey team. They play well, they're well coached, they do a great job on the ice, and I think that's a team that's going to come out of it, and they're going to, try and the coaches say, let's try and win a couple of games here, boys. We're playing better hockey. Let's get back to where we were. And I think they'll do that, and they'll be a real good playoff team, because they played really well most of the year, and they just gone to a tough stretch lately. And the coach is trying to push them. Let's find a way to win here. Let's win this 1 game or win these 2 games, and then move right back on track.
Gerard, where did you get the coaching bug? Was it late in your career as a player? Like, did you stumble into it? How did you get into the coaching ranks?
Well, it was just sort of, I was tricked into it, to be honest with you. At the end of my career, I was sort of, you never retire as a player. You sort of get kicked out. So I was done playing, and I went back to my hometown in PEI, and there's a junior A team that Doug McLean and, Dave Cameron and a bunch of different guys always coached there, and they helped out there. So I went back and I was doing nothing, and the head coach, Gerard Smith, he asked me, he said, why don't you come and, give us a hand on, practice night. So I said, yeah, I'll do it a couple of times. And then all of a sudden, a month later, I'm on the bench. And then a month later, he decides to quit, and, he's too busy with school. So that's how it sort of started. And I enjoyed it. Like I said, it was a lot of fun. It was tier 2 hockey players, and, you knew a few drills from your old coaches in the NHL, but I had no idea how to coach, and you learn from there, and it was a lot of fun.
I love that you say you really had no idea. So you just kind of learned, and sometimes you get thrown in to see how you adapt. I'm going to assume because, you make to the NHL, you're an extremely hard worker. So did you start reading books? Were you calling coaches? How did you start to learn what functioned and worked well for you as a coach?
No, you know what? It was just sort of looking back at coaches you had, the Jacques Demers, the Harry Neals, a bunch of different guys, Doug McLean, all these guys that were your coaches. And you said, you know what, you take a little advice from some people like that. But I just sort of, I learned early on you had to be your own person, but I took a little stuff from, like with Jacques Demers, I had my 4 best seasons of the player. And Jacques was an easygoing coach, and he wasn't a big typical X's and O's coach. And, he let you do your thing, and then he had Colin Campbell and Dave Lewis and those type of guys as the X's and O guys. And so you took a lot from Jacques Demers. He was a good person, and he let me play my game.
So do you feel, are you like that personality coach mixed in with obviously you got to be an X and O guy nowadays. There's more X and O's maybe than ever before, but how do you go about that, knowing your strengths? And then do you ensure that a guy on your staff has better strengths in the areas that maybe you don't?
100%. And that's, like I said, Mike Kelly's worked with me for a long time, in Vegas and Florida and junior and in St. John with junior. So, what Mike brings good to the table. Mike runs a good practice. Mike does he's good at video, and all coaches have to be able to do that nowadays. It's not just one thing. And I'm one of those coaches that really believe you got to use your staff. Yeah. I got 3 assistant coaches on my staff. They're going to be used. I'm not going to sit there and, I'm not going to do everything. I'm not one of those type of coaches, and they're important to your group, and they're important to your players.
I'm fascinated by the PEI connection. You mentioned Doug McLean and Dave Cameron. How tight is your PEI hockey community?
Real tight. I mean, there's not a lot of us in the NHL from Prince Edward Island, but we get together a lot in the summertime. It's a small province, and you know each other very well. And like I said, I've known Doug McLean. I went to his hockey school when I was a little kid. So it's and Doug's not that much older than me, but it's people and people you get a chance to. And my first coaching job in the National Hockey League was assistant coach with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So obviously had the opportunity to get that job, and Doug thought I could do the job, and he gave you an opportunity. So you respect people like that.
Now, are there, there's the list of hockey players from PEI. I think it's 34 that have made it to the NHL that were born on Prince Edward Island. How much more is there an influx, though, of NHL players and staff members that make it to PEI in the summertime? Are you guys all kind of connecting at a certain point, the guys who regularly vacation there or stop there?
Definitely. Anybody that comes to PEI is calling Doug, calling me. We're going golfing. There's all kinds of golf in PEI, as everybody knows. It's beautiful in the summertime. So there's all kinds of people coming down. And, Brian Burke used to come down here all the time to see Dion Phaneuf and guys like that. So there's always people dropping by. And like I said, anytime they come, they give you a call. And there's always big golf tournaments down here. You get all kinds of guys down, former players. Paul Coffey loves to come down here. There's all kinds of, the older veteran guys that come down to PEI a lot.
Gerard, quickly circling back to where we started for Hockey Canada, when you make the calls, is it you? Do you kind of call maybe the players that you have a connection to, or is that Roberto? How does the recruiting process work out here? Because I think you guys leave on like the 16th, so like 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, right now it's basically what's going on is Roberto and Shane are calling the general managers. They're not, a whole lot of talk with the players right now because the players are still playing. So they're just getting a feel of, who's healthy enough to go if the season was over today, and who do you think would have an opportunity. So they're reaching out to guys, the guys, agents and general manager of the team pretty much.
All right. Okay, Gerard, we like to end each interview with rapid fire. Just some fun, lighthearted questions, some that'll make you think. All right, So here we go. This one's pretty easy. What is Gerard Gallant's cocktail of choice after a long day or after a big win?
Crown Royal.
Straight on the rocks or what?
No, Crown and Ginger.
Crown and Ginger. Okay. What got you into? Why is that your drink of choice?
I've never been a big drinker, and actually it tastes good. I had one about 10 or 12 years ago. I always used to have a cold beer, but after about 10 or 12 years ago, like I said, we had a golf game, and that's what was available. And ever since then, I enjoyed one or two.
Okay. Speaking of golf courses, What is the number one course you would recommend in PEI for someone to come play?
Crowbush Cove is unbelievable course. I don't play it a whole lot, but it's at the other end of the island, and I play Anderson Creek and Green Gables, but Crowbush is an outstanding course.
Okay. The nickname Turk, who gave it to you? Where'd it come from?
It was a long time ago. I can't even remember. I was 3 or 4 years old, and I used to go down to my uncle's basement, and he was raising little turkeys, and I used to get down there and chase them all the time. So that's one of my brothers called me Turk, and it stuck.
Okay. Nice. Okay. This might be a tough one. Who punched harder? Joey Kosher, Bob Probert?
Joey Kosher.
Oh, okay. What makes a good assistant coach?
Doing a lot of my job. No, a good assistant coach is, you know what, when you're working behind the scenes, and like I always said, the head coach isn't right all the time, but you got to respect your head coach, and you got to work with your head coach. And there's ways to help out with the player. You know, sometimes you come to the players, and you know you're not going against your head coach, but you're working with them. And I think a good assistant coach reads off the head coach real well, and that's really important.
Now, I know you've played with some of these guys and you played against them. So you come in the room and you have to wear one of these helmets. Peter Klima's, Butch Goring, or Mike Foligno's. Who are you wearing and why?
Peter Klima, just because I played with the guy and I didn't like it. It was that, especially early years when he had that skunk hairdo at the back of his helmet. And we used to make fun of him all the time. But Peter's a good fella, good friend.
Okay. What advice would you give if it's not you, to the Seattle expansion coach on how to have success early?
You know what? When I went into Vegas, there was no expectations. It was about competing and playing hard every night and having a lot of fun. And I think what we did, we just got on a roll early and believed in ourselves. And the guys had a chip on their shoulders. And you know, the players come in every day, and whoever's team we played that night, that the boys wanted to win for them. So they just had a little chip on their shoulders, and we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun and enjoyed it, and there was no pressure, and you went and played, and then by Christmas time there was pressure.
And lastly, so you're in the drive-through at Tim Hortons in Prince Edward Island. You've got Crosby and McKinnon both set to serve you. Who do you want taking your order and why?
Well, probably Sid. I mean, Sid's the old veteran who's one of the best players ever to play the game, and I love McKinnon too. But you still got to go with Sid right now, and Sid, and you know, Sid was doing the order when they do that commercial, so Nate was just rolling the eyes.
Awesome, Gerard. Thanks so much for this. We appreciate it. We hope to see you back behind an NHL bench very soon, and best of luck with Canada coming up at the World Championships.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerard.
Gerard Gallant, man, he's a beauty. Now, just to clarify for people, I know that Crosby and McKinnon aren't from PEI. That was the whole point of my question, but everybody knows that those two guys are the Tim Hortons guys. Just for any of our Maritimers, I know that Sid and Nathan aren't from there, but that's why I said if he's in a PEI Tim Hortons, and maybe they're visiting. So just want to clarify that.
Good. Glad that we got that out of the way. Jason, where do you think Turk lands?
Well, I liked your suggestion of Detroit, right? Like you connect the dots. Him and Steve Yzerman were teammates, and Gerard Gallant, and it's not like they're just a connection of teammates and line mates. Gerard Gallant has a really good track record of being a head coach, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm still stunned at why he's not the head coach in Vegas. Like, what else could he do? So
you could tell that that's still painful too. Like he didn't want to dive into it, but the fact that he's not watching probably says a lot. I mean, he built that, helped build that team from nothing, gets them, to the Stanley Cup final in 2.5 years. That's all you get.
Yeah. Like that. I think Gerard Gallant, he's a coach. If I'm teams that are looking, and I think there's going to be a few teams this offseason for sure. I didn't expect many coaches to get fired during the year when you got to pay for 2 coaches. So I think we will see some changes. Detroit it makes a lot of sense, Frank. And, it sucks for Blashill because he kind of had to be the coach during the down years. I don't care who was coaching that team. If you don't have talent, you're not going to win. But Detroit's a team that's now coming on the uptick. And that's a team that I think if you're a head coach, you want to jump on board for it because they've got a lot of good pieces.
Have they, in an odd way, has Detroit exceeded expectations? Like how bad that team was last year? I know they made some subtle improvements, brought in some vets, but I don't know. I mean, the thing about the Red Wings job is I think if you talk to their front office and Steve Yzerman specifically, they've got like 4 years to go. This isn't going to be a, hey, we're going to turn it around next year or the year after. So you'd have to know what you're signing up for. And I don't know that he necessarily fits. That's like, to me, Gerard Gallant is more of a win now guy. He's not like, Jeff Blashill is the guy that you have a, coach until you're there. And then you bring in a guy like Gerard Gallant. I don't know. I don't know that Detroit makes that much sense, even though those connections and ties are obviously there.
But look, he came into Columbus when he was a head coach in Columbus. They were just starting out, right? He's been in Vegas. He's got experience on having to be patient and know that you're not going to have instant success, but you're a guy who helps build your team to get better and become more competitive. And so
I think there's better fits. That's all I'm saying.
Who do you think's better?
Well, I mean, I mean, everyone wonders about Seattle, right? He did it in Vegas. Can he do it in Seattle?
Oh, yeah.
I think the question about Seattle is, if he was going to be Seattle's guy, why isn't he already, given the fact that he's been on the market and you could have hired him? I guess from Seattle's perspective, it's like, why do you need to pay a guy that is still getting paid from someone else? So that's part of it. There's so many teams that are going to have potential coaching changes. I'm just going down the list. Does going back to Columbus make any sense?
Oh, I'd rather go to Detroit. If I'm Gerard Gallant and you give me two options, I think Detroit's future might be better than Columbus right now.
How's that possible? I know, look at the standings. You'd say, that you could make that case, but
yeah. Well, maybe I should.
You get a healthy Werenski and Jones.
Yeah, I should.
You've got two good goals. Like they've got plenty of like. This is a team that has been 5 straight playoff appearances in Columbus, and yeah, they've got some work to do, but they've also got some cap space. And we had Jarmo Kekalainen on recently. He's a really smart guy. I'd pick Columbus over Detroit, like without even thinking.
No, well, maybe part of that is just them and the coach have tapped out on each other. Maybe that's a big part of it. You mentioned Jones and Werenski. That's for sure fair. I like the upside of Detroit a lot. Now it might not be next year, but
it's 4 years out, like literally 4 years out.
Yeah, I don't know about 4. 4 to be a cup contender, but to be a playoff team and win a few rounds is probably 2 years for Detroit, I think. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, like, if it's Gerard Gallant, and I asked him and he didn't want to bite, which is totally fair, but I do wonder, would you turn down, like, Seattle for him, I think is too close to Vegas, that everybody looks and says, well, he went to Vegas and they went to the Stanley Cup final, so we're going to hire him. And if he doesn't, it's automatically considered a failure. He's not as good. So I think it's a tough situation to take, because the odds of them doing what Vegas did are extremely low, number one. Number two, because look at them. They're going to come in that division. You got Vegas, who's very good. And you got the Oilers, who finally, after decades of suck, are a team on the uprise with the two most offensively gifted players in the league. So it's going to be hard to even get out of your division, never mind go to the Stanley Cup final for an expansion team. So I think the comparisons would be too close for Gallant. And even if his team has success, it won't be considered the same success because he didn't go to the Cup final.
Yeah, but I think you have to throw that out the window. Like, can Ron Francis and the Seattle Kraken staff really even hold themselves to that? Like, it's insane what Vegas accomplished. No one's ever going to do it again. So to think that that's the standard that you need to live up to, I think is unrealistic. But I think the problem with hiring a coach for an expansion franchise is sort of that fear of the unknown. How are things going to come together? And Gerard Gallant's done it. And it's not just the success that he's had. It's also just the idea of creating your identity, your team culture, all those things that you want to establish right from the start. He helped do that in Vegas. And I think that's worth its weight in gold, not to make a Golden Knights pun, but to bring that same sort of attitude and approach to Seattle, I think would be really valuable. And not only that, but from a coach's standpoint, we talked about teams being years away. Don't you get a longer rope in Seattle? You know, you would think that he would have gotten that in Vegas, 2.5 years. Vegas. But I would think if you're going into Seattle, you have a realistic expectation that you're going to be there at least 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's true. If I'm Gerard, and I'm only speaking for I think there's other options. And the other thing is, if you're Gallant, you're probably waiting till the playoffs, Frank, because it happens every year. There's going to be one of these playoff teams that goes out in the first round that had high expectations. They didn't reach it, and they're going to look to change their coach.
I'm just going through, like, I'm while we were talking, I'm going through my list thinking of what are the other potential openings. Arizona, I'd be shocked if Rick Tocchet goes back there as a pending free agent. He's actually going to be on our free agent frenzy board as one of the top available free agents this offseason because, he's a guy that teams are going to be clamoring for. Is there a potential coaching change coming in Anaheim? I'm not sure. But if you're looking at some teams that might flame out in the first round?
Like, what if Colorado doesn't get out of the first round?
Yeah, that Jared Bednar could be a good one.
Right? Like, I just wonder, like, I think Bednar's fine coach, but
there's not many. Like, the point being, I don't think there's that many. Maybe, and then Buffalo, is there an opening with their interim coach? What happens in Montreal with Dominic Ducharme, although Gerard Gallant doesn't have the French factor? I don't know. How many openings are we really going to see?
What about Winnipeg? What if they don't make it?
I don't know. Kevin Cheveldayoff and Paul Maurice are in lockstep. I have a hard time believing that would be the outcome.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's but the playoffs, people get emotional sometimes.
The pressure in that market will be intense though, if that team loses in the first round.
Oh yeah, for sure. So it's lots of fun. We got playoffs for the American divisions. We'll start on the 15th of May, and we have the North maybe on the 18th or 19th. Nothing secured yet, but we'll get into that later on this week. Frank, glad to hear that you're doing better, feeling better on the road to recovery. And we want to thank once again our good friends, our new sponsors in the woodjersey.com studio. You can check it out at woodjersey.com if you like jerseys and you like, as Frank said earlier, the intricacies of a wood jersey. I know we're going to have some, we'll show them up on the pod sooner, but check it out, woodjerseys.com. We'll talk to you Friday.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Seravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode.